Hi everybody, my name is Neil Demery and I am your reading writer. In our first video we read chapter 1 of Visions of a Watering Eye, my new novel. Just a short recap. In the first chapter we met Bridget, who was the savant mermaid and basically the star of the novel. We also met her companion Spring, and we met Daniel, the resident bad guy and the leader of the clan of Black Shadows, all of which had recently crossed over from the dry life, something that will become apparent to you as we move on. So without further ado, let's read chapter 2 of Visions of a Watering Eye. As Bridget and Spring approached the battery, they could see that the level of activity was above the norm. The stronghold appeared to be at a battle alert readiness. The entrances had double their normal contingent of sentries, and when they were spotted, alerts were blown on conch shells, and they echoed throughout the area. And an armed group of mermaids were swimming out to meet them. The group was led by Miranda, who was the fierce general of the mermaid army. Bridget thought that for Miranda to be leading this force for a seemingly trivial matter was very unusual. Miranda was the greatest of all mermaid warriors. She had proven her courage and leadership skills many times in battle. Her long blonde hair was streaked with red, and she wore an impressive strand of shark's teeth around her neck. The teeth were pulled from the mouths of enemies that she had killed in battle, which to this date numbered over 20. Miranda's left hand was missing its last 2 fingers, but it clutched a trident as though it were whole. She lost the fingers in personal combat with Lazarus, Daniel's #1 lieutenant in the last battle of the war. None harbored more hatred for the clan of Black Shadows than Miranda. Bridget and Spring stopped and waited for the party to reach them. Bridget was sure this was an official escort taking her to see Tara, a point to which she was not in error. What she didn't realize was the manner in which she was to be escorted. The battle-ready mermaids did not slow when they reached their appointments. Miranda, Sarah, and Satina surrounded the young mermaids with weapons leveled and consumed them in a prison-like fashion, hiding their hands and treating them with the roughest of fashion. When they were totally in control, Miranda spoke. "If you wish to act as renegades, then you shall be treated as such." Spring tried to respond, but we were just tying. She was cut off with a sharp blow from Miranda's trident to her backside. "Prisoners will only speak when requested to do so. Do you both understand?" Bridget tried to come to Spring's defense. "Well, there is no need to—" She was also silenced with a jab to her back from the blunt end of Sarah's spear, a blow which took Bridget's breath away and immediately made her feel as if she would be sick. "I will ask you both again. Do you understand? If the answer is yes, then you may both nod to the affirmative." Miranda was not to be trifled with on a normal day, and when on an official mission, which to the dismay of the young ones this seemed to be, she could prove very dangerous. Shock and surprise were set aside long enough for them to give nods of understanding. "Perhaps the two of you are not as stupid as you look," Miranda growled. With this, the 2 shocked mermaids were grabbed up as if they were lumps of seaweed and escorted to the main gate. The battery's main gate was an 8-foot-high wall, constructed primarily of shell and rock from the surrounding mountains. The gate itself was some 12 feet across and was closed with a set of sturdy iron bars, which retracted behind the wall in one piece. On either side of the gate was a 20-foot-high sentry tower. The wall traveled around to the east and west sides of a large courtyard, which backed up to the base of the massive mountain face. The east and west sides of the battery each had a smaller gate, which was 20-foot-high sentry towers. This system of towers offered an excellent panoramic view of the surrounding area, and with sharp eyes could spot an approaching enemy from far away. And even at night, as mermaids had excellent night vision. One would think that a mermaid could stand a watch without a tower, but to remain stationary against moving water, even though slowly moving, was an exhausting proposition. The towers offered a place where a mermaid sentry could sit or hold her position for an extended period of time, making the towers a necessary element in the battery's defense. The wall served no such vital function, as most aquatic enemies could simply swim over the top. However, it did serve as a courtyard boundary, and through time and tradition, all mermaids used the gate and respected the wall perimeter, except when necessity dictated otherwise. As Miranda, Sarah, and Satina approached with their packages in tow, the extra sentries were standing down and the battery was returning to a normal level of activity. The gates were drawn open enough to allow the 5 mermaids passage into the courtyard and were then closed behind them. Though serving only a ceremonial function, the gates were meticulously maintained to ensure their smooth operation. Most metals used by the mermaids were non-rusting brass or copper, which required little attention, but the gates were constructed of iron and did not enjoy such neglect. Little went to waste in the mermaid society, and when small fish were found dead or dying, they were often cut open and used like oily rags on the bars of the gates, which were very susceptible to the ravages of the harsh saltwater environment. For a time, the fats and oils from the fish would cling to the metal, counteracting the decaying rust and corrosion which would invariably form. The fish were then stripped of meat and bones, which were used for other purposes. The battery's courtyard was always alive with activity, and today was no exception. A detachment of 12 armed mermaids, which were prepared to deploy with Miranda, but were ordered to stay back when Bridget and Spring were spotted, were standing down and returning to their normal duties. Along the east wall was the training area, where regular weapons and tactical drills were conducted to keep the warriors sharp and battle ready. On this day, there were no less than 10 younger mermaids going through spear drills at the upper end of the training area. The spear was the primary mermaid weapon and was also the easiest to master. All mermaids were required to become proficient with the spear before moving on to other forms of weaponry. At the lower end of the training area were a group of a dozen battle-tested sea women who were practicing advanced surround and attack drills, employing a variety of weapons and armor. These drills were conducted under the watchful eye of Drina. Drina was a veteran of many campaigns and had risen to the rank of first lieutenant, but the promotion to field general had eluded her. At one time, she was thought to be the next in line for the ultimate military rank, but the elders reasoned that she lacked the aggression and quick wit necessary to reach the level of proficiency required for the position. It was at this time that Miranda was promoted above her to lead the mermaid army. Miranda possessed a tenacity and non-tolerance for error that made her a great field general. But it was this non-tolerance which made her a poor military trainer. Traditionally, the field general was given charge of all tactical and weapons training, but it was Drina who possessed the patience to gently but firmly instill the lessons necessary to become a disciplined and competent warrior. Though Drina took the advancement of Miranda as a snub, in the minds of the elders it was anything but, and she was put in charge of all military training. As Bridget and Spring were being escorted past the training area, some of the younger mermaids stopped to stare at the spectacle, but one quick, stone-felt glance from Miranda quickly changed their focus back to the task at hand. The 5 continued to proceed into the battery caverns by way of the main cavern entrance, which immediately opened up to the largest inner area known as the Great Hall. The Great Hall was a massive space, which comprised some 8,000 square feet. The ceiling was of such a height and span that its top could not be seen from the floor and looked like nothing more than a black void. The walls accommodated several openings which led to other chambers of the inner battery. The Great Hall was primarily used as a meeting area where the mermaid elders held court, but it was also used for formal functions. At the upper left corner of the hall was the elders' dais, which was comprised of a long stone table and 5 high-backed stone chairs, one for each of the 5 lower elders. Immediately behind was a 3-step riser upon which sat a throne-like seat that Tara would occupy. The mermaids did not call Tara a queen as Daniel had alluded to. Instead, the mermaid ruler was known as the High Elder. The recalled history of the High Elder went back 18 rulers to Celia, who was the first to hold the exalted title. Celia was anointed to the post after a successful flight from the male-dominated society known as Dracos. Mermaid historical knowledge was referred to as recall because they had no written language, and all learning was passed on verbally. The teaching and passing of this knowledge was the responsibility of a group known as the Learned. Each of the learned was responsible for a category of this history, and each was assigned an apprentice to which they relayed this knowledge, who would likewise pass it on to the next. Thus, through this system of history, the mermaid lore was passed down through the ages. Before the warriors escorted their prisoners into the grand hall, they took an immediate right turn, which led them down a corridor, at the end of which waited the detention area. This was nothing more than a room with a table and some formed rocks which were used as chairs. There were no bars, and the only way to keep someone from escaping was to post armed guards. But a mermaid placed in detention was never guarded and never watched. They were on their honor to stay put, and in the past this had always been sufficient. Bridget and Spring were led into the area and their bonds were removed. As the escorts turned to take their leave, Miranda looked back and said, "Make yourselves comfortable, children. You will be called before the council within the hour." With that comment, Miranda left the room. "All of this cannot be happening." Spring's voice was clouded with fear. I should never have followed you. I should have reported you missing right away. Bridget, why do you insist on ignoring the simple rules that are placed upon you? Bridget's reply was matter of fact. "I don't know. Most of them just seem silly to me." "Spring, I am sorry for having dragged you into this. I planned to tell the council that this was all my doing. When you tried to tell that to Miranda, you got the blunt end of a trident in your back. I didn't think anybody will be interested in how it all happened, only that it did." Spring flopped exhaustedly into a chair as if all were lost. "There's a lot more to this than we know," Bridget went on with an air of contemplation. "It's not like simple rules have never been broken before. We were only gone for a short time, so why did everyone get into such a panic?" Spring had a look of perplexed surprise. "Do you really not know?" "Well, no, I don't." "Bridget, do you not know what others say about you?" Bridget sounded truly puzzled. "No one has hardly said anything to me. When I approach others who are talking, they quickly get quiet, after which they greet me rather formally. I thought it was just because I was a newling." Spring took a deep breath and continued, "They say you are special. Have you not had a class with Amy yet?" "I've heard the name, but have yet to make her acquaintance." "Amy is the learned one in charge of recalling special knowledge." "What is this special knowledge?" Bridget asked. "Her knowledge goes back to the dark times, to the times when the mermaids were part of Dracos." Bridget was a sponge for knowledge, and she brightened noticeably as Spring continued. "Dracos was the society where all merpeople lived as one, men as well as women." Spring seemed to be forgetting the problem at hand while relaying the information to Bridget. She had a talent for teaching, which had not gone unnoticed by the elders. It was for this reason that Spring was chosen to be Bridget's guide until the end of her indoctrination. Normally, Mermaid's formal education did not start in earnest until she was fully assimilated, but as always, Bridget was the exception. Spring had an affection for relaying the things she knew to anyone who would listen, and the elders wanted Bridget to learn all she could as early as possible. Spring was the logical choice to relay these casual lessons, giving her talent for teaching in a conversational manner. "In the days of Dracos," Spring continued, "mermen and merwomen made up the most advanced civilization the oceans had ever known." Bridget's eyes were literally shining with anticipation to know more. "Why did they ever break apart?" Dracos was a very superstitious society who placed great stock in seers and prophets. Some years prior to the flight of the mermaids, a prophet was born. His name was Angus. Did you say born? Bridget could not believe what she was hearing. Do you mean that this Angus was actually born into this world and not one who had crossed over? Well, merpeople are entirely capable of procreation, just like other sea races. Take the sharks, for instance. Daniel was one who crossed over, as was Lazarus. But the average Black Clan warrior is a product of procreation. Is that why Daniel's eyes look different than other sharks? Bridget asked. Well, I don't know, but I guess so. And the sharks that have crossed over, they're much more intelligent as well. All of the sea races are populated from both crossings and births. Bridget responded with a note of confusion. But not the mermaids. Only because we have chosen for it to be so, and unless the men of Dracos have found another race of sea women, it's the same for them. Bridget was alive with wonder. So tell me about this Angus. As Angus matured, it became apparent that he had been instilled with a new and unique prophecy. Prophecy which struck fear in the hearts of the men of Dracos. Dracos was governed by a council of elders identical to our own. They also have a high elder as an overseer, just as we have Tara. But in Dracos, only men could hold these positions. Angus prophesied that... No, wait, let me see if I can remember it word for word. One will come from the world afar, one of gold and softness, one who will hold the staff and the star. This one will raise the gold above silver. The one results from what no others have, that of the staff, the wheel, and the slab. The one will rise to ultimate rule. All others will bow to this will. Others will fold and be used as a tool. To the one ruler, the prophecy fills. There's more to it, but I can't remember it all. Bridget was so excited that she was swimming in circles as she talked. That's what Daniel asked me. He asked me those very words. What words? The staff, the wheel, and the slab. Spring's eyes got as big as mermaid scales. Then he knows about the prophecy. How could he know such a thing? Bridget was ready with the answer. Because he has spies in the battery. The words were spoken in a hushed tone. Spring now looked more worried than ever. Spies? Do you mean to say that there are mermaids in league with the clan of Black Shadows? I do not believe it. Well, how else would Daniel know the prophecy? Unless... Bridget stopped cold. Unless what, Bridget? Unless Daniel has contacts with Dracos. Both women stopped talking and dumbly stared at each other. Bridget finally broke the silence. I still don't see how all of this relates to me. Spring swallowed hard before she answered. The elders think that you might be the one of gold who has crossed to rule the oceans. Now it was Bridget who looked frightened. The one of gold? Me? That's just ridiculous. I'm just an ordinary mermaid. I haven't been even fully assimilated yet. I still have aqua-colored scales. Spring looked Bridget up and down and finally answered if awestruck. No, you don't. Of course I do. Just this morning I counted 8 aqua scales, and that was just in the places I could see. She looked down to point them out and saw that all of her scales were now gold in color. How can this be? No one changes this fast. Spring could hardly talk. You did. My God, Bridget, you are the one. Bridget sounded angry, but she was clearly confused. Stop saying that. Prophecies are nothing more than old wives' tales, and I refuse to believe them. She then turned her back on Spring and faced the wall. Her mind was racing like never before. If this was thought to be true, how could everyone but her have suspected? How could she have been so blind to the situation? Images started to flash in her mind. The room filled with blinking lights and strange sounds came into her head. She had seen the room because she was in it. And if so, why did she view it from such a strange perspective? It was as if she were seeing the room from a position of lying down. She started to recall strange words like doctor or hospital, and so she recalled a word she did not recognize. The word was terminal. Could this have been the place where she was before her crossing? Why were these things coming back to her now? A mermaid's dry memories were supposed to gradually fade, not come back. In the corner of her thoughts, she was hearing her name. It came softly at first, and then suddenly at a volume which snapped her back into reality. She turned her head, and there stood Miranda. Off in another daydream, are we? Come, children. The council awaits your arrival. With that, Miranda turned and proceeded out into the great hall, followed by the two frightened young mermaids.